Welcome back to the Opposition Podcast, episode 7. And in our weekly tradition, I want to apologise for the music. Rukshan has gotten no better through these episodes. Now, just before we start, we've come to a decision.
Yep, that's right. We have decided that this time slot, 7 o'clock on Thursdays, will be the time slot, unless there's any major changes, we'll let you know. But yeah, it's going to be 7 o'clock on Thursdays for the Opposition Podcast.
So that's it. So set your alarms for 9 p.m. so you don't have to listen to Rukshan waffle on anymore.
Thanks, guys.
Maybe 7:30. No, what is it? 7:03. So you don't have to listen to your
7:03.
music.
Yeah. Look, tell me in the comments, was that music okay? I just put it on because it's very mellow. It's very chill. You know, it's not meant to disturb you.
There was nothing okay about it.
No?
There was nothing okay about it. We needed something. I think our guest, who you're about to introduce, I think our guest is asleep.
That's right. Anyway, guys, before I do the introduction, I would let you guys know that you can submit questions as you're watching. We will try to take some questions today. Just put a question mark at the start. So we're trying a question mark today. So put a question mark, then space, and then type in your question. And if it's a appropriate or suitable question for what we're talking about, we will try to address it. Just be mindful that if you do submit questions, if you are commenting, we might put your comment up on the screen. So if you're writing stuff, it might come up on the screen as well. But look,
explain to people why they need the question mark, because I think people are like,
no, the reason you put the question mark at the start is just so I can filter through all these comments which are coming through, filter through the trolls and just the general comments that people are saying. Like someone here is writing, "I liked the music." So generally, I wouldn't want to put that up on the screen. Someone else wrote, "The music is fine. I love the music. Don't listen to Avi." I mean, we have some really good people watching and tuning in tonight. So thank you, everyone. I agree with you guys. But look, before I go on too long talking about this, I want to introduce our guest today. And this is someone that many Victorians would know for obvious reasons. But primarily, I think, during the pandemic, this guest that we're having on today really stood up for the people of Victoria as an elected member of our parliament. And the guest we have on today is none other than David Limbrick MP from the, I was going to say Liberal Democrats, but you have a new name now. So tell us about your name change, David, for your party, and just give people a general idea of who you are if they don't know you already.
Thanks, Rukshan. So we're now called the Libertarian Party. We recently voted to change our name. So our party is based on a philosophy. Effectively, what we believe is that individuals shouldn't initiate force against other people. We believe that government should play less of a role in people's lives. And so we base all of our beliefs and our positions around defending individual rights and defending the rights of the smallest minority group, which is the individual.
Yeah, I mean, I guess during COVID, I really saw that. And one of the ways I saw that was the fact that besides many other politicians that didn't turn up to protest that people were taking part in, you actually turned up. And one of the things I've seen you consistently say, it's not just the lockdown protests that you go to. You went to the BLM protests. So you kind of get out there and show your face in all these different issues which are happening in our state. So you're across the board, like you're not someone that generally will take a position just because it's the party position. It's more based on your values. Would that be correct, based on the libertarian values? Like that's where you come from.
Yeah. So we base all our positions on our beliefs and principles. But like you say, I've been to lots of different protests, during the pandemic, before the pandemic, and after the pandemic, because I'm like many people. I don't believe many things that the media say. I don't believe what the government say. I want to go along and hear things for myself, and so I'll go along and hear and try and listen to, what do we have in common with what these people are saying, and what do I agree with, and try and focus on that rather than just listen to the noise that comes through the mainstream media and through the government.
Yeah, I might actually throw to a question, David. Like I've seen it come up a few times, and it was just people saying, what happened to you after the lockdowns? They're saying you disappeared. How did you disappear after the lockdowns in terms of being in the public eye and discussing these issues?
Well, no. I've been doing a lot of media since the lockdowns. So actually, last month was like our biggest media month ever. So we've been doing a lot of media, but not talking about COVID so much because, it's sort of, fading into the distance, although there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I think there does need to be a reckoning. We've been pushing for a Royal Commission. But, there's other issues now that maybe people that were interested in the lockdowns are not so interested in
as well.
I get that a lot.
I get
I get now from people saying, Rukshan's disappeared. Where is he not coming to the protest
I
anymore?
think it's funny. All that is that back then during the lockdown, people were at home, stuck at home, and they were just glued to their devices and they were watching everything online. We're all still here putting our stuff out, whether it's in the media, but you're also posting stuff. I see it all the time. But I just think people are just less engaged because they're living life.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot less engagement on social media than there was during the lockdowns. A lot of people, you would have seen, with your live streams, like they just got insane
that's when
engagement.
He was popular.
Yeah,
no one watches him anymore.
Insane engagement, like in real time. And that was because, people were stuck in their houses. They had nothing else to do and they wanted to see what was going on in the world. And you provided, eyes on what was going on. They were calling you the eyes of Melbourne at one stage. And I think it's the same with everyone that was talking about things during lockdown. They had a lot of engagement, but after that, things have changed now. The issues have changed, and
because it also affected everyone. So everyone was stuck at home, and the issues that were playing out affected every single person in the state or around the world. It wasn't even here. People around the world were watching Rukshan. Now he can barely get 10 people to listen to him.
barely. But I'll keep moving along. I'm trying not to get involved with Avi and
the politics.
Into the politics. Just trying to keep it light and friendly, everyone. Unless you guys want me to. Look, the topic I wanted to bring up first, David, was just something that's been in the news, I guess, last 2 weeks. And this is around a book, a particular book. I think it's called Welcome to Sex by Yumi Steins and Dr. Melissa Kang.
No one even.
Everyone
knows. Just says her name because you have to, but everyone's talking about Yumi Stein.
And look, there's a lot of controversy in the public square about this, and a lot of politicians had different views as well. Last week we had a guest on, Senator Ralph Babette, and he had very strong views about the book. Not to the sense of banning the book, but saying that it needs to be done in such a way that kids aren't exposed to these books. What were the terms that he used?
I just like how polite you are walking into this. Listen. He called you out. You called him out. We want to set the record straight.
I'll show what David wrote. I'll bring that up on the screen.
Let's bring it up. Come on, Rukshan. He's so nice about the way. Let's stir the pot. Let's get a
Senator
fight.
Babette put up a post talking about this book, and then David Limbrick, who's here with us right today, he wrote, "Beware the book burners and their censorious hangers-on who think that their opinion on books should decide what is and isn't available for parents. They are spitting in the face of parental rights. Parents decide what is appropriate for their children, not the government, not activists, and certainly not Senator Babette."
So in fairness, he's not actually saying they should ban the book or stop parents from having access to the book.
Didn't he say it should be wrapped in plastic?
Wrapped in plastic, so for adults to be able to grab it.
So who should decide whether it's wrapped in plastic?
I think the wrapped in plastic is
maybe
saying...
it's ACMA.
No, but what he's saying is we should treat it like any pornography.
Is it pornography?
I think it is. I've looked at it. It's pretty pornographic.
You really think it's pornography?
I think that it's just as inappropriate for children as pornography. I actually think it's worse. I'll tell you why I think it's worse. With pornography, when kids look at pornography, all kids, they look at it, they're on the internet, but they know that it's adult content. And they know that it's not something we should be doing. They're being naughty. Now, this book is presented as child-friendly. It's created for children, designed for children, and it
was being sold in the parent section, though, in the parenting section at Big
But
W.
it's going in libraries in the kids section. It's being targeted.
Is it?
It's being.
I haven't seen that.
I've understood that it is, but it doesn't matter. The point is that it's. So I'm happy if you say it's going just to parents, and then parents can decide to give it to their children. Every parent has the right to be a bad parent. I have no problem with that. The point here is that it should be treated as pornography, because I think it's actually worse than pornography for the reason that I just stated, that it is targeting kids and it is teaching kids how to perform certain sex acts in a kid-friendly way, which by default is teaching them that kids can do this. Kids can scissor. Kids can have oral sex. Kids can anal sex. It's disgusting to make that okay for kids. And that's what I think Babette's position, from my understanding, was. And that's my position.
Okay, so the thing that I haven't read the whole book, right? So I don't even have an opinion on whether this book is good or bad. What I do have a strong opinion on, though, is parental rights. Parents should be the ones that decide whether or not material is suitable for their children. Now, there's a lot of parents that have lots of issues with, I know you're a parent, right? It's hard talking about these sort of issues with kids, like talking about sex and things like this with kids. And there's lots of people that have put out material out there to help parents do that. Now, this book is one of those pieces of material. Well,
I don't think
whether or not you like the book
but
or not.
I agree with you on parental rights, but I think this takes away parental rights because this goes past the parent.
How do you know? Well,
this takes away
do you think kids are going and buying this book by themselves? Because they're not. They're not.
No, but if it's in the library, if it's in the kids section, if it's available and targeting kids.
But is it?
Well,
I don't think it is.
I haven't heard the argument that it isn't. It is a kid's book.
It was being sold in Big W in the parenting section,
but
is my understanding.
Dave, like this is the issue with this book when I look at this book is, even though it's like the discussion now is around, well, parents will decide it's the book parents will. I don't think it's a book that parents are going to read to their kids. Like, I don't see parents reading the material in that book to their kids. If parents are buying the book and giving it to the kids are reading it by themselves, and then through that, those kids might distribute it to other kids or whatever.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Let the parent decide. My problem here, where I think it fits into the libertarian, because I see myself as a libertarian, is I think it takes away the parent's right because it is bypassing them. Now, if you say that it is not, it's supposed to be in the parenting section, so it's only for parents. So then all I'm saying to you is let's make that official. You can say it's not in the kids section, but a lot of these libraries, these state libraries, they are activists that run it, and they are going to put it there. They are targeting kids, and that is where I think it is absolutely wrong. For the same reason that I think you believe in. I think it is taking away parents' right to decide whether the book is for their children or not.
Look, if we take away, all right, let's say we wrap it in plastic, right?
You're caught up on the wrap on plastic.
Well,
I think it's the idea of making it.
But if you're taking it away from parents to be like, how do you know?
Take it away from kids, not parents. Take it away from kids. Can we take it away from kids and give it to the parents to decide?
I think you're making a leap. Like, I'm not sure that it actually has been. Like, are kids actually going out and able to buy this?
Kids can't go out and buy a pornography magazine by themselves. A parent has to go and buy it, and then if they decide to share it with them, I don't know what the legality on it is, but I dare say they can go and do that. It'll make them a bad parent, but I just think it'll make you just as bad if you go buy. I just think we need that same rule. However you're going to treat pornography, treat this book. And if you're asking me, do I really think it's the same? I say it's worse. And as a parent, I would hate to think that in my kid's school or in the state library or anywhere that my kids go, that some Yumi Steins can go and bypass me by teaching my kids how to scissor, how to have anal. That concerns me.
My understanding is that this book was written in response to kids being exposed to pornography because it was do you know what the average age of kids being exposed to pornography is in Australia? It's
young,
like 12 years old.
I know
it's
that.
bad, right? And so a lot of parents are in this situation where, like it or not, they've been inadvertently exposed to pornography, and then parents have to put that in context. Now, it's really hard for parents to do this sort of thing, and sometimes they need tools to help them explain some of these things that kids may have been exposed to. Now, whether or not this book is a good tool to do that, like I said, I haven't read it, but I want parents to be able to have the opportunity to find whatever tools that they feel are valuable and helpful in providing context for these things that kids might have been inadvertently exposed to, and helping them as a tool to educate their children. And I know as a parent myself, it's really hard to go through that process and talk about these really difficult things with kids. And maybe some of these books, and parents will decide that they're not appropriate for their kids, and maybe other parents will decide, well, maybe I can use this tool to have a conversation with my kids. But ultimately, it should be up to the parents. And look,
exactly,
exactly,
it should be up to the parent. But
this book is directed at parents, though.
Like, it's not. You haven't read it. Read it. It is targeting kids.
Well, it's meant to be read by children, but parents are the ones that are meant to.
It targets kids, and this is my problem: is activists often, especially on the left, they create a problem. Kids have been looking at pornography since I was little. I remember the old pornography in the magazines that the kids used to steal from their parents. But we knew it was wrong and naughty, right? That has been an issue forever, and it is a problem. And parents do need tools, but parents need tools. You can't open something and go, "Oh, I'm doing this to help the parents." It reminds me of the government telling me, for your own protection, we're going to give you these. So we're going to.
But that's what you're talking about here, though. Like, you're saying that
for the kids' protection, not for the parents.
But who's going to decide this?
Every parent should be in charge of his own children. The state needs to protect the children, not the parents. The parents have every right to be a bad parent. I have no problem with that. I just don't think that the state should be starting to say, because you think they're not going to target it. They're going to be teaching these in school. This is going to become curriculum. I guarantee it.
Well,
that is the direction.
So is there an ability here, David, for a community standard to be set? So what's acceptable for children? For instance, I've spoken about this before. Smoking, kids can't go and buy smokes.
Yeah.
But if a parent wanted to give a smoke to a child to try it out at home, the legality of that,
Who knows? It doesn't matter, but parents can do that.
Parents can do that if they want their kids to experience these things.
Well, I'm not sure that's legal.
No, we're saying we don't know about the legality, but at the end of the day, a parent
But it's the same kind of thing. We still, as a community, we enforce certain standards to protect children. Now, this particular book, it comes across as and I share some of similar views to you on about parental rights and, not banning books and all this kind of stuff. But there is an element of this book where it's very instructional, and the instructions are aimed towards children on how to perform certain sexual acts. It's not so much just about the education around what these terms mean. They tell you, like, you can do this act in this particular way, and if you do it in this particular way, it will be more pleasurable, or it's okay if this particular act is pleasurable. And my problem with this whole thing is, let's say there are parents that want to introduce their children to this. Fine, that's their kids. But then those same kids are taking these same ideas, maybe even taking this book to school and giving it to another kid. And maybe they're experimenting with other kids that don't want to experiment in these things.
There's a lot of speculation here.
There's speculation here, but the way that the book is, I guess, as an instructional type of thing for children, and children aren't as mature as like we like to portray them. They're a bit more,
I think the thing is, I think you need to read it before deciding, because I am with you on the parental rights. I'm arguing on this issue the opposite point for the same reason. I'm arguing because I, as a parent, am afraid that my rights are being, as a parent that has the right to decide what's good for or bad for my kids. And that's why I think that if you read the book, and as a parent, you may have a different feeling about it. And I'm not saying ban the book.
But do you think it's being sold directly to kids? Because that's not my understanding.
A kid can walk in and buy the book, and if it's going into
10-year-olds don't go into Big W and buy books.
They're saying it's 10 to.
My understanding is it's 12 plus. Is 12 the recommended
plus.
Age.
The writer says Yemini says she's happy for a mature 8-year-old
to flick through it.
To flick through it, but even 12-year-olds, right? You're saying that if it is aimed for 12-year-olds, then it is going to go into kids' libraries for 12-year-olds. So any kid can just walk past that and grab it. And that, you know what? Do you remember being 12? I remember being 12, and that will be the book that'll go around. Every kid's going to read. All right? Doesn't matter how mature or immature they are. Every kid is going to read that. And unlike pornography, where every kid will pass around a photo and they'll look, they will learn these sex acts, how to perform them. and it is all dressed up as kid friendly. So that's the problem. It's instructional for impressionable young kids, and the problem is that I think that's what's driving it is not as clean as you think it is. The reason behind it, it's not there because there was some problem. I think the left often creates problems to set their agenda, to push their agenda forward. They say, we have this problem, here I found a solution. And how convenient that their solution is so disgusting and vile and just fits their worldview perfectly.
Okay, so there's a few things here, but like, think about the way that, think about the way that parents deal with this sort of thing, right? So as we said before, the average age that kids get exposed to some of these materials is at like 12 years old. Now, that's unfortunate. I'm actually sad that that's the case, but it's the reality. Like it's the reality, right? It's the reality. And so we have a situation where parents need to have tools available to be able to discuss these things with their kids,
parents,
right?
Absolutely.
Parents, yeah. So, I just don't buy the idea that government intervening in these things, because I don't trust the government to make good decisions here, right? Because they won't make good decisions. And like if you're, putting it away with the porn, as you're saying, what parent is going to go over there and look for stuff that's appropriate?
A parent that is looking for help to deal with these issues. It's a parent that's you're saying is struggling with these issues is going to then source that material. That's the exact person. I want them to have to source it because you're saying they're the ones that are having this problem. I just don't want it to be there for every kid to just pass around, especially because it's instructional.
But is that really what's happening? I mean, we've had this
situation
situation
you
now.
were a kid once.
Well, we've had this situation now where there's been this hysteria from conservatives about this book that they don't like, right? And they've managed to turn the book into a bestseller. Like totally counterproductive.
Yeah, but it's activists.
Totally counterproductive.
No, it isn't. It isn't, because at the end of the day, who's making it a bestseller? It's activists that are buying it in support of. Who cares?
But
it's not going to the kids that are just stuck there at school that without their. And again, I'm saying that if those activists want to give it to their kids, then fine, that's their deal. But I'm just saying, just don't put it straight in the kids' hands. And if you're saying that you don't have a problem, you don't think it's going straight in the kids' hands, let's make that official. I don't trust the government either. I don't trust the government to ban it. The government's there at least. We have rating systems for freaking movies. The government's job is there to protect those that can't protect themselves and to protect the parents' right. More importantly, the right to parents to decide. So I can take my kids to an M-rated movie, but that they come with me. They can't just walk in there. Same thing as this book. That's all I'm asking.
But things are changing so fast, like especially in our state in Victoria. What kids are learning at school, the type of material kids are being exposed to. We have drag time, story time in Parliament House. The kids are being exposed to a lot of different concepts and ideas.
Yeah.
So there is argument to be made that certain types of education, like what we did in the past, might not be as appropriate today. Like we need to change with the times. There is that argument in terms of kids.
I still don't think that negates what I'm arguing.
In terms of what David Limbrick is saying, like the involvement of the government in that, like who decides and what how do you make the determination between what is education and what is instructional or what is pornographic? That goes into a different area.
I'm looking at the next step, right? And if you say, well, we want the government involved in this, we want to stop this, then what's the next step? Like, because the government will involve themselves in all aspects of bringing up your children, right? That's the problem here, is that we're saying, well, we want the government to decide what's suitable for our children and what isn't. And I'm arguing the exact opposite of that the government shouldn't be deciding what's suitable and what's not suitable for our children.
What if a parent wants to sexually abuse their child? Where do you draw that line? It's a parent's right. At the end of the day, where do you draw that line? I'd argue that this is a form of abuse. So I think that having it out there where I wouldn't go that far. So I'm not saying it's. I think a parent should have the right to choose, and obviously a parent doesn't have the right to abuse their child. But there is a line that we draw socially on all these issues. And I think that the line here for this specific issue, and again, I think if you read it, maybe you would have a different view on it, that I think the line has to be that it is absolutely in the parents' hands to decide. Give the book to each parent. I don't care. Just don't give it to the children first. Let the parent decide. And
but isn't that what's happening already?
no, why do you say that? Why are you assuming if it's?
But you're saying it's being like distributed in libraries. Like I haven't seen it in
No,
libraries.
I'm saying
like,
well now maybe less. Now not, but it was in libraries. People were videoing in libraries. It was going in libraries and kids sections.
It's been everywhere.
It was in libraries. I saw people on it.
Yeah.
There were videos of people going into libraries, and then the library kicked the guy out for showing that the book is in the kids section in the library. Of course, if it's a book aged to 12-year-olds, it's going to be in the kids section. All we're saying is if you don't think it's going into the kids section, let's just make that official. And it's not because I trust the government. It's that I don't trust these activists who are portraying this as a kid-friendly book. I don't think that they can get around the rules of child protection because they're framing it as an educational sex ed book that parents who are struggling to teach their kids. If there's a problem, if a parent really needs help with that, let them source the info themselves. Let them source even this book themselves. If they read the book and they say, yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for, firstly, I'd say get help. But secondly, I'd say let them then go and teach that or read that or give it to their child.
But I mean,
That's it.
like, you know, like we're talking about deciding what we think, you know, the government.
But we have a
deciding
rating system already. We already have.
I don't believe we have one for these books, do we? Like,
No, but I'm saying
besides age.
there must be a classification if pornography is classified.
Yeah.
We have for movies. There is a classification. There must be some sort of classification. R-rated. I'm sure books as well.
Yeah, the OFLC and and ACMA.
So there is a classification for books. Is there?
Yeah.
So there is a classification already. So I just feel like this should be in the classification where, whatever the classification is, where parents can be the one to borrow or buy, but they can give it to their kids if they really feel like they need to. That's it. Anyways, I think we may have to agree to disagree here and let some of the comments in.
I mean, I agree and disagree with both of you on different elements of this. So I've been caught.
That's called being a fence sitter.
No, I'm not being offensive.
And I love David. I agree. I actually...
Because, like, here's the thing, right? If we have an objective classification system and we say, all right, well, on objective grounds, this book is going to be banned, what other books are going to be banned? Because let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of books banned.
If you're
like religious texts, they're going to be banned. Like seriously, like
listen. But it would be the right of a
take
parent.
The next step.
No, but I'd say to you, if I think it's pretty clear, if you have something showing sex organs of either male or female, it should be classified as over whatever age. I think that's a basic classification.
Back when I was in primary school, they had, what was it? Book called Where Did I Come From? I don't know whether you guys saw that as well. That had sex organs in it. Like it had, you know, fairly explicit cartoons, things like that. That was in grade 6.
Did they have scissoring?
No, it didn't have scissoring.
Did it have oral and anal?
No, look, I did sex ed in grade 5 and grade 6 and the start of high school. And I remember, like, obviously, like all the kids in, like, it's a co-ed school, everyone's like watching this. They played a video as well, and they showed all this kind of stuff, and everyone's like giggling and just being kids, right?
Yeah.
And it's all kind of innocent still, very innocent, and it's very based around biology and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
But at no point during that time, even though I learned these basic biological things that as kids we already kind of knew growing up, but you kind of teachers telling you now in class, there was no instructions there on these kind of sex acts. And some of these sex acts are stuff that even adults wouldn't know. And now all of a sudden it's like
it's a manual.
Kids need to know this. And, you know, like I said, kids are curious. Kids are experimental. You know, again, I know you said, David, that I'm speculating, but I definitely, I've referred to this book as like almost like a children's Kama Sutra in terms of the way that it depicts and shows how you can do certain things. And I don't know if that's necessarily educational in value, even for parents as a tool to tell kids like, hey, this is how you do this pleasurable sex act. I don't know if we as a society are at this state now where we have to teach children. The best that we can do as a society in Australia, in the West, is to teach children how to have sex in certain particular ways. Because if you go out of the West and you go into other countries like, you know, in South Asia or something, I'm telling you, they're not teaching kids how to rim each other. Like, that's not the standard That's the
but
truth.
that's what they're doing in this book.
And the kids in the West, they're being taught all this stuff about, rimming and how to have anal sex and all this kind of stuff. And we think that's progressive. And maybe it is progressive. But at the end of the day, I think it does challenge society. It might even cheapen the innocence of children in the West. Because, part of childhood should be growing up innocent. And I know we're exposed to all sorts of things because of, TikTok or pornography and online and the internet. But kids all around the world are exposed to that. And one thing I learned growing up was if parents can control to an extent what kids are exposed to in terms of setting, boundaries and guidelines. And it's almost like in this country, I feel like in the West, parents have almost like, or the government or whoever, there's people out there, progressives, telling parents, look, you just give up on parenting. Kids are going to be exposed to sex and all this kind of stuff. They might as well learn about rimming now. Like, that's kind of what it feels like to me. But having said all of that, I agree about parental rights, and I agree about people having access to books and parents choosing the books and materials.
But I'm not arguing that.
Yeah, no, but I get it. But I also understand what David's saying, the fact that kids aren't going to buy this book, but kids will circulate this book. Like, kids will circulate this book. But even if it's wrapped in black, and
yeah, but at least I'll know it's not.
Even if it's made more taboo, kids will probably more likely.
Let me ask you something. If an adult came up to your child and started talking about these issues, teaching your child about rimming, anal sex, scissoring in a cute, friendly way that is and teaching them how to do it, telling them how to do it, would you not be concerned?
Of course, that's ridiculous. But here's the thing.
But
right?
what's the difference between that and a book telling it to them in a kid-friendly way? I don't get that.
If parents,
used to call that grooming. If an adult does that,
grooming is like taking children away from their parents,
but that's what this book is doing. It's taking away the parents' ability to teach these ideas in a more appropriate way.
But the context here is that it was written. My understanding is it was written in response to kids getting
How do you know that?
Inadvertently exposed to pornography. And many parents who may have had their kids inadvertently exposed to pornography need to put that into context. Now, if they need to explain, like if a kid's seen things and a parent wants to say, well, here's what was actually happening there, I don't know, I don't know what tools are out there to help parents do that. And it's really hard to do that.
There's a lot of tools out there. And again, I'm saying, even if you think this is a good tool for that, leave it to be exactly that. Let it be a tool for parents, not in the bookshelf for kids, even if you think kids are not going to grab it. But we probably should move on because I want you to read it, and then I would love to continue this conversation. I want to see you as a parent looking at it like that, thinking, if this book can be given to my child without me being able to stop it, so they can bypass me, get a hold of this book at whatever age. She's saying 8.
As a member of parliament, I not only have to think about this book, I have to think about every book, right? And that's what I'm worried about.
But there are classifications already. You're saying that we have classifications.
I think.
Do you want to get rid of all classifications?
Well, I think that classifications can happen with or without government. I don't think it necessarily needs government to do that. But
whatever.
What I'm concerned about is that, all right, let's say a whole bunch of conservatives get hysterical about this particular book. What happens when a group of people get hysterical about another book you might like?
But again, I'm not saying ban the book.
I think it's time to move on.
We've got to move on. But
I read in the comments, some people just move on.
Do you think classifications is important or not? Do we need classifications?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think the government needs to classify
it. But not government. Yeah. But whoever's classifying books, this needs to fall under that. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Move on, right. Because...
but look, we're going to stick with the issue of parental rights.
Because yes.
Because, and look, David, this is a poll that you put up, and a lot of people agree with you that parents should ultimately decide what kids have access to. And I think if you ask any parent on most issues, forgetting this particular topic, they will say that they decide, not the government decides.
And I agree. I would have voted yes to that 100% as well.
But we're going back to a tweet that you put up a few months ago now. And this was around the change of suppression conversion practices bill, which was passed. And I'm just going to read this just to give an idea of what you're discussing here. The sales pitch for this was that it would stop horrific historic gay conversion therapy. If it just did this, I would have supported. But of course, it didn't just do that. This is an example of the newly prohibited practice outlined by the bill. Legislation, sorry. If your child asks you for a tattoo and you say no, you're a good parent. But if you ask for puberty blockers and you say no, you're breaking the law now. Can you kind of explain?
Yeah.
So you objected to this when it was put in front of you.
Yeah.
And what's this objection based on, like on this particular comment here?
Yeah, so, all right. So the Change and Suppression Conversion Practices Bill was put up in Parliament in 2021. We underwent very extensive consultation with many different stakeholder groups on this. And we ultimately came to the position that we couldn't support it because the government was effectively interfering in the consensual communications between adults, all right? And the headline for this bill was around gay conversion therapy, right, which is a horrific thing which happened historically. I think there's been isolated cases of it happening more recently. And as I said there, if this bill had have just been banning that, I would have been okay with it. But what it did was something far beyond that. It instituted what's called an affirmation-only approach. So this is for children that may have questions about their gender identity. And what it's made illegal in Victoria is if you see a psychologist or a doctor or your pastor or whoever it may be, they're not allowed to do anything other than affirm your stated gender identity. So, if I was a minor and, even if I was an adult and I said to someone, I'm questioning my gender identity, maybe I'm a girl or something like that, no one would be allowed to, in a professional sense, say, are you sure that's right? Or maybe have you thought about this? They're only allowed to affirm it. Now, this is something that I felt was very dangerous, and my views on this have only hardened. Since this bill's gone through, I've been contacted by many parents who have had children in schools and things like this who've, their child has had questions about their gender identity, and people have only been able to say, just affirm whatever they've said, whether or not that may or may not be correct. Now, many other countries now, such as the United Kingdom, Norway, Sweden, I think Finland as well, they've backed off on this approach to children with gender identity issues and gender dysphoria issues, and saying what they're doing is what they're calling a watchful waiting approach. So children that have these issues, they give them therapy, they give them whatever support they need, and then when they're older and able to make decisions for themselves, then they decide what they're going to do next. And we're not doing that in Victoria. I'm very concerned about both. There's two types of things going on here. One's called a social transitioning. This is where a child may change their appearance and possibly their names and pronouns in a school. Sometimes this happens without parental knowledge or consent, which is really concerning. I think that that shouldn't ever happen except in very, very, very exceptional cases without the parental knowledge or consent. But then also,
what would be a case where you'd be okay without parents?
If the parents are abusive, and some sort of criminal element, I think, but that would be very rare. I think that in most cases that this is happening, that's not the case. The child probably just doesn't want their parents to know what's happening, and that shouldn't be enabled by the school system, I believe. It's very difficult to get numbers on how many children this is actually happening to in Victoria. They don't keep very good statistics on it. So we don't know, but I've had many parents contact me and say, this has happened to my kid. In some cases, they only found out about it after, a year later, they got a letter from the school and they said, oh, by the way, your child's been acting under a different gender and a different name for the last year.
That's so messed up.
Yeah. And on top of that, we have the other issue with around medical treatments. So that's different to social transition. So we're talking about medical treatments where a child will, and this normally does happen with parental knowledge, where they'll go to a gender clinic or something like this and potentially get prescribed drugs that will delay their puberty and potentially get other drugs that will give them cross-sex hormones for the opposite sex. Now, as I said, there's many countries now that have been backing away from these treatments because there's uncertainty about their effectiveness and also uncertainty about the safety of these drugs over the long term. I have very serious concerns about the long-term effects of these drugs and the idea that kids can't actually consent to these drugs. I know that, often when kids have medical treatments, their parents consent on their behalf, but I feel like parents and children are potentially not being given good enough information to understand and make good decisions about these sorts of things. In some countries and in certain states in the United States, they've actually banned these drugs, the puberty blocker drugs. They've just banned them outright. So what I've been calling for is I want a review into gender medicine for children in Victoria. Indeed, I'd like it for Australia. I think we need to get some eyes on, what's actually been going on here. What are the outcomes of these sorts of treatments, and are they actually safe and effective? Because I have serious doubts.
So this legislation is actually passed. So this is going to become law.
It's already a law.
But I feel like there's many people in our community that probably wouldn't know that this is the case.
Yeah.
Especially in a state where there is a lot of diverse communities as well. Mm-hmm. Just a question I have around this. For instance, if a parent were to find out something about their child and they got a religious person involved to advise that child, would that be in breach of these type of what's stated in there?
It depends how they went about it. But yes, if they weren't affirming the child's gender, then that there's a bunch of actions that could be taken. You would have seen the acronym in that tweet, VEOHRC, Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. They could get involved and potentially they could have the power to intervene. They've been given quite broad powers under this act. They can demand documents from schools. They can do all sorts of things. So they have coercive powers to investigate and indeed put fines and things like this on parents depending on the severity of it.
Because I haven't seen too much. Like, you'd think with something so major like this, there would have been a massive educational campaign by the government, for instance, like just informing people. I think a lot of people get inadvertently caught up in this if they don't understand that this is the case in Victoria now. Like, I'm just saying in general, I haven't really seen too much material from the government saying that this is what it is like now.
So there was a lot of material from the government to schools and, like, in particular religious schools, and psychological organisations, this sort of thing. They were telling them, here's the new laws. I don't think that parents would have been necessarily informed about this sort of stuff and would understand it. It wasn't super high profile at the time. There was a fairly heated debate. I copped a lot for opposing this. I was one of the few that did. We came to the conclusion that we couldn't support it. And when we came to that conclusion, we copped a lot of heat on social media from all different activists. The Liberal Party supported it going through, which we were disappointed about. But
I'm so shocked.
But I think that our state's made a big mistake with this. This affirmation only thing, I think, is a mistake. I think that it channels people on a single path that may be having, I don't deny that gender dysphoria exists, right? There's kids that have problems with gender dysphoria. They need support, they need help, but not all of them being channeled down this path need drugs and medical treatment. In fact, I've done live streams with people who've gone through that and then realised that it was a mistake and detransitioned.
Yep.
The very fact
And there's all sorts of dramas with that, isn't there?
yeah, and the very fact that detransitioners exist proves that it's not effective in all cases. But I just don't feel
When
like
you say effective, you mean as in the person thought they wanted to be the opposite sex and then they realised they didn't.
Yeah, in many cases, what they've found looking what's happened in the UK and Sweden and other countries is that many of these children that have had issues with gender dysphoria, they found out later that they were really instigated by other issues. So maybe they had issues with trauma in childhood, maybe sexual trauma. Maybe they had, and this is the alarming thing that they found in the UK, is very high proportion had, they were neurodiverse, so had things like, ADHD or autism spectrum disorder and these sorts of things. And they became focused on this idea that they were a different gender and later came to the conclusion themselves that that wasn't their underlying problem. And so I have concerns that we're not actually treating the underlying problems of all of these kids. Some of them do have, genuine gender dysphoria, and that's a very difficult thing to treat. But I don't accept that all of the children undergoing this actually have that. So,
there's a big push, and that's why I agree with everything you're saying on this issue. 100% support, and I'm grateful that people like you stand up to it in Parliament, even when our so-called opposition just join the left on this craziness. But that's why when I look at this, I think something like in that book it talks about this type of stuff, doesn't it? About your gender and it actually does. It is an indoctrination into this, and that's why we're seeing such an explosion in kids suddenly identifying, is because they're being given bad information, and that is part of my issue with something like that.
I'd be reluctant to jump to conclusions as to the causes
where they're getting
it. Of the causes
why is
of this
why
stuff.
is there a massive explosion in kids identifying as?
I wouldn't profess to know the answer to that. I think there's a lot of people speculating on what the causes could be. That's why I'm calling for a review and an inquiry.
So you want to find out why
I want to find out. I want to find out the reality, because there's
who
lots
would
of
you
people,
trust to do that review? That is not driven by ideology, because all of this, and I don't care if you're looking at the conservative or the left or the right, doesn't matter. It's been driven by ideology. Just like I don't like that book for what it's written in there, and when it talks about the gender stuff, gender ideology, I find that disgusting and violent. I think it's crazy. It's normalizing almost mental illness. It's not looking at an issue and giving people the support they need. It's making me have to accept your delusion. So who would you trust to run a review that will take the politics out of it and actually look at the medical issue for the medical issue, the science?
So I don't want to name a particular person,
No,
but I know
group?
I know that in the UK, the CAST review, they did some excellent work there in the UK, and in fact, that's what led to lots of changes in the UK.
But what institute here would you trust to do that like them there? I just feel like every institution here, as we saw through COVID, has been corrupted by politics. Even the pharmaceutical, even the Dowdy Institute. No, but all the Dowdy Institute, all these, they all became politicized.
They're all captured.
And you can't trust any review they do. Who would we trust that will take the science back and really explore what's going on and review it and come back with something that's not just a woke...
Look, I don't want to name the person because, I don't know who that person is or who that
organization
group is. I think the first step is to agree that we need to have a review. That's the next step is all right, well, who's going to actually do that? It's an important thing, right?
We are doomed.
Well, they've done it in the UK. Other countries have done this, right? It's not impossible. And we can look at the evidence that's been forthcoming in other countries as well. They've done a lot of this work already, right? It's not like we have to start from scratch. We can look at what they've done in the UK, what's happened there. Not everything's the same between here and the UK. Same with countries like Sweden. Other countries like the United States are very diverse treatment protocols in the United States. Like it's all over the place in the United States. But we can look at what other countries have done, what works, what doesn't, and look at the evidence. I think it's possible to do it.
But are we going in our state, I know with some of the other bills or legislation that's coming up, like the anti-vilification, all this kind of stuff, are we going to a position in our state where we won't even be able to have these type of discussions going forward in the open like this? Like I feel like that's the direction we're heading in.
Yeah, and that's my concern too. And this is why I'm so, hard line in defense of freedom of speech and parental rights, even when it's uncomfortable for me to do so, because we're heading to a situation now where, with these anti-vilification laws, I've asked the Attorney General in Parliament, about will the new anti-vilification laws, will they outlaw people stating the dictionary definition of woman, for example, right?
Yeah.
And we don't get a straight answer on that sort of stuff, right? And this is
that's where we're heading. That's what they're going to do.
This is why we need to talk about these things, and this is why we're talking about it now. We need to be very clear about certain things need to be open for discussion, and especially things that are controversial like this. We cannot let them be just run roughshod over by activists 100%. Who have this ideological viewpoint that they want to push, especially when there's real questions about the science behind what they're talking about. We need to be able to question this stuff. And that's why I always fall back to, parental rights. Like parents need good information on this sort of stuff, and parents need to be the ones in control of this. Like the idea that social transitioning can happen without parental knowledge or consent is absolutely ludicrous. Outrageous, right? But it's happening in Victoria right now, right? The idea that children can be prescribed puberty blocker drugs without, parents being told of all the potential physical consequences, later on in life. Like they can become sterile, they can have, they're just discovering all of the problems with these drugs now. So I'm very concerned about this stuff. I think that we need to really fall back hard on, defense of free speech, defense of parental rights, even when it's uncomfortable, because it's just so important.
Yeah, that's why I'm on board with this, like especially against like censorship on these issues, like having these open discussions. I think
it's so
important.
You know how censorship works, man, right?
Yeah.
You've seen it during the pandemic.
Seen it,
People with alternate viewpoints will get shut down, right?
And that's why I'm so concerned about like governments being involved in discussions, even around books and classifications. Anything when I hear the government is involved, automatically it sets off a red flag for me, because I don't always trust the intentions of government. Even if we trust them on one issue, they will use those same laws against us on another issue.
Well, we saw that with the pandemic. They were using
that's the line that we're threading, and I think in Victoria it's like on another level in terms of the acceleration of all these things. And I think a lot of people in our community actually don't know these things are happening. Like we might discuss it, we might see it at protests, the activists might be talking about it, and it might get some media coverage. But the average parent, a lot of the time, I'm just talking about the average parent, not those who are clued into what's happening in the political space. These things are happening around them, and they're finding out it's too late by the time they found out to even oppose these things. So is there more that I guess political groups or your party or even activists who might share your same views, is there more they should be doing to reach out to people, or is it again just something that's going to be fought on the battle lines, a battlefield of the political battlefield rather than
culture wars?
Yeah, well, it's not really a culture. Like it is a part of a culture war, but the way that laws laws and rules are passed in Victoria, I feel like it becomes a point of discussion. Then it's somehow just rammed through and passed, and then that's just what it is.
So it needs to break through to the mainstream, and I think part of that is happening now. So for a long time there was. Like back in 2021, when this change in suppression bill went through, there was almost no one in the mainstream media that was brave enough to criticise it. Very, very few people. Now you may have seen that there's a lot of people who are actually asking questions and saying, is this the right approach? I think that that's going to happen more and more. I have more to say about that in the next few weeks. But I think that it's something that people are just learning about, especially when parents learn about what's been happening with some of these issues, many of them are horrified. Especially like this social transitioning of children without parental consent. Like that's just, every parent that I've spoken to about this is absolutely horrified that it could happen, and the parents that it's actually happened to their kids are even more horrified.
But I've told some parents about this, and they don't even believe it's real. They don't even believe it's a thing. Like some people think you're making it up.
Yeah, well, I'm not.
I'm just saying, like in general.
I wish I wasn't making it up. And this is something like I'd never been involved in this issue before 2021 when that bill went through. Like this wasn't something that's core libertarian thing. It's like something that we all sort of had to form positions on and this sort of thing. And when you start getting parents contact you and tell you these stories, you can't just ignore it. You have to say, well, it's my job as an MP to defend their rights and especially their parental rights. And so we're doing that. So it's a real thing. It's happening. I don't think any people, anyone serious denies that it's happening. But what's not known is like what's the scale of it. Like no one seems to know that. Like it surprised me when I brought it up at a meeting once, right? And some guy stands up and says, "Oh yeah, that happened to my kid." Like I'm like, well, how widespread is this? Like we just don't know. There's no stats on this.
Do you want to go on to because I think moving on from the when it comes to government, because we touched on it before we actually went live. We were talking about the banning of swastikas and the Islamic State flags. Now that's a federal thing or is that a state thing?
I think we have it in the state, but
both.
the feds are talking about pushing that through now as well, particularly around the Nazi symbol and also the ISIS flag as well. And you put up a post about this, which I saw, where you were saying it's defending freedom of expression isn't about defending things you like.
Correct.
And we are seeing in Victoria and now federally as well, government's insistence that they can control gestures, symbols, especially I think with the Islamic State one, the thing that the Liberty Victoria was saying about that was that some of the inscriptions on that is actually religious or important to the Islamic and Muslim faith. And the government just blanket banning that because it's on that other flag that's related to ISIS might not necessarily be the best of ideas. I think we can probably have the same discussion about a swastika because it's used throughout different cultures to mean different things.
Sure.
But it's not even that, as we were saying before we went live today, is I'm somebody, just because of my background, that am a target of both those groups, the Nazis and the Islamists. But I want to see who's waving that flag. I want to know who my enemy is. And and the other thing that I find within my community, you have groups like the Anti-Defamation, which is like the Australian ADL, where they're very into the censorship and banning of swastikas and Nazi anything, and what they call hate symbols. And the question I've always posed to them is, what's going to happen tomorrow? And I from our discussions, I think this is where you stand as well. So you're going to ban the Nazi swastika today, but tomorrow the same people that stood by your side going, yes, let's censor this, ban this, let's ban. Tomorrow they're gonna say that the Israeli flag, the Star of David on the Israeli flag is a hate symbol, because if you put a poll around the world, I think that they might win that argument, because if it's a numbers thing, a lot of the world hates Israel and they will claim that. And it doesn't matter where you sit on Israel, but as the Jews, the ones that are pushing, those organizations that are pushing for the banning of swastikas and Islamic State flags or anything, tomorrow they're going to define the things that you find sacred as hate symbols. And the books. And the books, they're going to ban it as well. So have you had conversations with these organizations?
I've had conversations with many organizations about this issue. Firstly, to the state of things, so you're correct in that the federal parliament is planning on banning the swastika and the ISIS flag, but Victoria has already banned the swastika alone in last year. They did that. Our party opposed that, not because we like the swastika.
I saw that. I saw the bad faith actors were targeting your party, and they were
not
saying,
many of them, but This is like back to what we were talking about before with the book. You don't really defend freedom of speech unless you're defending the speech of someone that you don't like, right? And this has been my problem with conservatives is they only ever defend the speech of people that they like. They never
some conservatives, and I don't think it's a fair argument when you're talking about that other book because I think when conservatives say things should be banned, I agree with you.
They voted to the Liberals voted to ban the swastika in Victorian Parliament, and no doubt they'll vote to ban it.
But
in
they're
the
not
federal
conservatives.
Parliament. Well, I don't know what you want to call them, but
Labor light.
So we're in a situation now where we have a bill already passed in Victorian Parliament. We've got the federal one coming up. Victorian Parliament's going further than that. They're going to set the precedent of banning gestures. So they want to ban the Roman salute, which is what the Nazis
I'm going to be scared to wave.
Yeah, well, it depends on the angle, I suppose. Like,
Hello.
I've heard that
back to the COVID.
Below 90 degrees is like calling your dog, but above 90 degrees is the danger zone.
It's crazy. It's madness.
But here's the thing: like you said it before. The problem is not what they're banning now; it's what they're banning next. Right? We've set the precedent in Victoria of banning symbols. We're going to set the precedent soon of banning gestures. The government already said when they put through the first bill that they're going to review it and see what other symbols need to be banned. Now, of course, the very limited number of neo-Nazis, I don't know how many there are in Victoria. I'd estimate less than 100. But, of course, they immediately stopped using that. And the last symbol I saw that they used was actually an arrow up and down and an arrow left and right with a dot in the middle. I don't know whether you saw that at some... I don't know. They had that.
Wait till they start using the Star of David.
Well... But that symbol with the arrows and the dot is actually the same as the emergency assembly point symbol.
Wow.
So they're going to have trouble banning that. They'll have to go through all the airports and spray it over.
Yeah.
But it's, like you said before, you want to know who these people are, right? You want them to identify themselves. We don't want to give them victim status. That's exactly what they want. They want to be seen as victims. They want to be, they want to tell people, well, we're oppressed. I'd rather we laugh at them, right? Because their views are ridiculous, right? And so, banning these symbols and gestures, I think it's really counterproductive. And I'm really happy that groups like Liberty Victoria have come out and said, this is stupid what you're doing here. Is the government going to pass it? Probably. There's not many people that are going to actually stand in defense of free speech here, right? This is the problem in this country, is that so few people will see the potential consequences of banning things that they don't like, and in the future it'll be banning something that you do like.
100%.
You said the Star of David, right? Why not that?
It will be.
Why not the hammer and sickle? Why not a whole bunch of things?
I don't know if they'll ban the hammer and sickle.
No, those are the people banning.
They're the people doing the banning, in my opinion.
No, but it's a good point because maybe one day when if a Liberal government comes in, they would go for the communist symbols just because we've already started that.
Yeah, but a lot of this isn't this around the fact that they're saying that people are offended by this. Like the government gets and says people are offended, it hurts people's feelings, and all this kind of stuff. So that's
I'm offended by it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what
I'm sure you're offended by it. I'm sure you are.
That's what I was going to bring up. I am offended by it. I know that it's bad, but I don't make that general leap to then say that needs to be banned.
I think it makes things worse as well. These people trade on the idea that...
Who's telling the government to ban it? Are people coming and saying it? Is it just associations? I'm saying the general population is not up in arms about this.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
The anti-defamation, they're a big drive. They push it hard.
But that's for their particular... if you ask any other ethnic groups, they would want to ban different flags and different symbols of people that they don't like.
Exactly.
People have ethnic conflicts, they have wars.
As a Sri Lankan, what would you want to ban?
No, I'm just saying that. But Sri Lanka had a civil war. There are people in the Sinhalese community who look at the Tamil Elam flag and they would want that banned. Now, I don't think that should be banned. In Australia, it's got nothing to do with Australia, but there are people that could potentially, if they have enough of a voting bloc or enough influence in society, they might be able to get something like that banned for whatever it is.
And you know how those Nazis recruit? They say, you want to know who controls us, see what we're not allowed to talk about. That's one of their biggest argument points. That's what they say. That's how they recruit.
I think right now in Australia, there's a bit of conflict between the Hindu community and the Sikh community with some of the stuff around Khalistan. You would have seen there was some commotion in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Some of these kind of stuff. And they actually want some of these symbols actually banned. And they are petitioning the government to have these flags and stuff banned.
That's the problem,
and
right?
it potentially could happen. But again, that's a conflict that's nothing to do with Australia. But I can potentially
But it doesn't even matter if it has anything to do. Like, the Nazi conflict has nothing to do with anyone anymore. It's kind of a historic thing that everybody that means a lot to the Jewish community, obviously. But the idea that you're banning it is really because you want to bubble wrap and protect people's feelings. But with all due respect, and I know there's people in my community that are good, decent people, a lot that would say, yeah, good, why are you arguing? They say to me, why are you arguing against this? This is great. And I come back to them with that exact point, going, today they're banning the swastika. Tomorrow they'll bag the Israeli flag. And if you think that that's not coming, you are deluded. You are. Because the further we go down this road, especially with the way we're seeing politics in Australia head towards this very left-wing anti-Israel has become popular on both sides, you're going to end up there. And that's the way they understand and they accept that. They accept that. But I think for everyone, for every minority group, you've got to paint it and you got to give them something that they realize, something that means something to them, that's important to them. And you say, hold on, but wait till everybody deems that as hateful and inappropriate and we should ban that. How will you feel?
Yeah, it's a dangerous precedent, like, banning symbols and gestures.
Gestures is insanity.
Because of course, like Rukshan was saying, like there'll be other groups that'll say, well, they banned this symbol. Like, well, this symbol.
Aren't we good enough?
This other symbol that I don't like is far worse than that. Like, these neo-Nazis, there's only 100 of them.
At the tennis, they didn't want to have the Russian flag displayed.
Yeah,
I mean that's just a commercial type of.
But they're doing
thing.
that as well.
But like that's another thing, right? So like it can like.
It will. The Russian flag, they'll agree it should be banned soon. They're banning it from TV. It's not on TV or anything.
Yeah, it's just like a white box they have on the TV. It's quite,
is that right?
Yeah. On the tennis,
well,
they just
now
had a white
the
thing.
Olympics, they're not even inviting them.
Really?
Yeah, they're not even inviting them to the next Olympics. Like,
yeah, right.
This is where we're heading. We're cancelling countries based on our alliances. But it's kind of
we have to be very, very, very careful about allowing the government to remove freedom of expression and freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, we have to be very, very careful. This is why before I took such a hard line on the book, even though it's really uncomfortable, haven't even read the book. And, well, my
I get
opinion
why.
on the book,
I think it's a different argument.
A lot of people are saying, David, you should read the book.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what I said.
They're saying, do your homework, David. Read.
I
the book.
don't read every book that I think should be allowed to.
Have you read this book? Have you heard about this?
No,
You
I
just
haven't
gave
read
him a
that book.
segue into the book.
Have you heard about this book?
I have. I've met someone who's read it, actually. Yeah.
And what'd they say? I know what they said. I just got to hear it.
They said it was pretty good. They said it was pretty good.
They said it was very good, is what you said when we weren't
That's
live.
definitely one thing I can get behind banning is that book.
Yeah.
I will drop all my principles and get this book banned.
I think that we should do a book burning, but somebody else has to buy it.
Yeah, I am absolutely convinced there'll be people
I
out there
actually
that want to ban
had
that.
a question, David, for you from one of the people watching from Alison, and she was asking your thoughts about what happened to Moira Deeming. That all kind of roundabout comes down to what happened at this particular rally in Melbourne. So they were asking, were you or any of your colleagues at the Let Women Speak rally, and just your general thoughts about what happened to Moira Deeming as a member of Parliament?
Yeah, so I was there back in March. It's a protest, so of course I'm there.
You were there?
Yeah, I was
How
there.
come you didn't cop anything for being there?
Because I'm a man.
It's because you're a man.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's mental.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I was there.
We're going to run this headline tomorrow.
Yeah.
Exposed.
I just went along because I wanted to check out what, like I always do, wanted to check out what was going on because I don't trust the media, don't trust the government. I'm glad I did go to witness what happened.
What'd you see?
What I saw was a bunch of women that wanted to talk about the clash of rights. They felt that there was a clash of rights between their rights and so the clash of rights between biological women and trans women, and they had things to say about that. I saw across the road a whole bunch of what I call trans activists that were yelling and screaming at them, trying to shut them up. Down the road a bit further, I saw a whole bunch of what I'd call Marxists, red flags, communist flags and stuff. They were yelling and screaming, wanted to shut everyone up. And then later on, we saw a bunch, probably, I don't know, a couple of dozen of guys dressed in black. I saw them early on. I didn't know who they were. I actually thought they were with the trans rights activist guys.
They look like Antifa.
Yeah, I didn't know who they were. They had bad fashion sense and stuff. Not that I'm anyone to talk about bad fashion sense, but anyway, they were... Do
you want to ban their fashion sense?
Oh, I don't know. It's pushing my limits. They had bucket hats. Who wears bucket hats?
I made fun. I interviewed them and made fun of them, and they didn't like that.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, there was a couple of dozen of them who they were yelling and screaming stuff. I couldn't hear what they were saying. They had a banner that was basically implying everyone was pedos or something, and then they went away. But yeah, look, I was pretty upset with the fallout from all that. I thought that it was unfair that these women were somehow associated with those guys. It was a bunch of women being held responsible for the actions of a bunch of guys.
How ironic was it?
Yeah, how ironic.
Because of what they were doing.
Moira got, in trouble with her party because they were sort of, too weak to stand up for her, I suppose. I'm not sure exactly what went down in their party room, but anyway, she got kicked out of the parliamentary wing of the party, so she's an independent now. But like the thing that I noticed, and this is why I've been talking about it a lot more, is I was listening very carefully to what the women were saying as much as I could because it was pretty noisy. And what I heard was a bunch of rights that were clashing, and they were concerned about those. And, as a libertarian, we care about rights, right? When we're thinking about how do these things fit into our framework. And I saw things like, they were concerned about the right to freedom of speech. They were concerned about the right to freedom of association. They were concerned about the right to freedom of belief. They were concerned about parental rights. And these are all things that I care about too. I may not have agreed with them about everything, but there's certainly...
Is there something you remember that you don't agree with them on?
I think some of the language that they used to describe transgender people, I didn't like some of the language that they were using. Because
when it comes to rights,
I think that transgender people have rights the same as everyone else, and I don't consider that they have less or more rights than anyone. And I think that some of the language that they were using wasn't good.
Might be mean phrasing.
Yeah,
I mean, rights-wise, was there anything that they were saying besides potentially hurtful language? Was there anything that you... And that's not everyone. There'll be,
I think some of the problems that they were talking about, I don't feel like they had good solutions.
But do you agree that they're real problems?
Potentially they're problems, yeah. Like some of the things that they were talking about women's spaces, some of those things I do see that it's easy to provide solutions for, but some of them I don't see that it's simple. Like, one of the things that many people talk about is toilets, and frankly, I think that a lot of those issues can be resolved through just design changes, and that's exactly what a lot of
What do you mean?
Private businesses and councils are doing. They're just changing the design of toilets to fix it. But I'm not sure, like, if you did.
But women's sports and that.
Yeah, so women's sports again. They were saying.
They don't want transgender in women's
they don't
sports.
want transgender.
Do you agree with that?
I think it should be up to the sporting codes to decide that, not up to the government. And I think the codes, in many cases, can decide these things for themselves on how it operates. I think it should be up to the members and private organisations. Because otherwise we've got government overriding the rights of freedom of association. And I think that if the government stays out of it, then these codes can figure it out themselves. They already do it with many sports, right? Like with boxing, they have different classes and codes. I think they can do that with many sports. And I think it just needs time to sort itself out. But
it's a good point, because if a competition makes a bad choice with it, then suddenly another organisation will come, a competitor, and they'll go, this is just a women's one for biological women and trans. But I guess the problem you'd run into is when schools and so state schools and things like that where your kids are competing, or competitions that are state run.
Yeah.
Who decides there? And yeah, I guess the women want their right to be able to protect their daughters' competition to be just girls for safety and just for fairness.
Yeah, and it depends on the sport as well. So, like some of the sports are very physical. There's a real chance of injury.
Yeah.
Like even if it's not a real competitive thing, it could be a chance. Like football or something is very physical. If you've got someone that's very physically larger than someone else, then they can cause them damage. But look, I think that codes are going through these difficult issues and sorting them out. Some codes are having like open classes of competitions. Other ones, where it's like kids stuff that's not so competitive. They're figuring out rules of engagement and how that works.
But isn't there an argument to be made that it goes beyond that, like the erasure of women? Like even the fact that we're having these discussions, and we have to keep in mind that a lot of this actually impacts women more than men. Especially when
three men here talking
especially when it comes to something like sport, this impacts women more than men. Like that's just the science of it. But like, don't we have to keep that in mind that this is not so much just about toilets and all this kind of stuff. It's actually about the erasure of women and their place in society. Again, in the West, like I think, I didn't really know too much about this issue until I started listening to these women and understanding it from their perspective, and then talking to women in my life. And there are major concerns there that they are fundamentally being taken off, this thing that they've had since the beginning of time. There's this massive change that's happening. So, like when you say the government's involvement in sports, for instance, like Swimming Australia, I think recently they're trying to be more inclusive, but that's because they're trying to stick to the laws in Australia, which they're trying to be in line with.
The laws are the problem.
But the international swimming bodies have different rules. So isn't there a thing that can happen where kids, young women, young girls are disadvantaged when we have sporting codes in Australia, for instance, that allow, boys, for instance, or trans women to compete in their sports? It's not the professional elite level. Because a lot of these solutions I'm seeing for sports is about in the elite level, we'll have these male-female categories.
Yeah. But
community sports, all this kind of stuff, that's more mixed. But doesn't that take away the chance for a young girl, for instance, to excel in her sport because she might come up against someone who is, a trans woman that beats her in a few rounds of some particular sport, and then she doesn't progress. Like let's say tennis, for instance, as an example. As a society, aren't we fundamentally changing the fabric of these things with these discussions, but also because of these laws? Like, I don't think it's just about the bathrooms and just about
no. I think sport is almost a bigger issue because bathrooms. We've always had
the argument's been made in those areas because that's what makes it really clear. It's
easy with a bathroom. I think when people make that argument, they're talking about change rooms in gyms, for example, and they're taking the example of somebody who's going to abuse that system, saying, all right, we're agreeing that people can self-identify or you can change gender. So, of course there would be, there will be people that would take advantage of that for their own devious, and that is a real concern because you're giving a license, you're giving suddenly a key to these to predators to be able to go in there and do that. So
as I said though, I think with toilets and change rooms, I think that design issues can solve a lot of that.
I'm not sure what design issues can stop.
With toilets, for example,
forget toilets, but change rooms for women.
Well, there's some change rooms where you have separate cubicles where people get changed and things like that. But I think with sports, it is a real issue. I think bringing it back to all right. Well, what's the fundamental right that we're questioning here? It's around freedom of association, right? So groups of people should be free to associate on the terms that they deem appropriate. Now, it may be that a sporting body wants to say, well, we only want to allow biological women in this particular sport, or we want to allow mixed, or whatever they want to allow. The problem is that the laws at the moment, both at a federal and at a state level, don't allow them to do that in many ways. And that's what this challenge at the moment, not in sport, but in this Giggle versus Tickle, I don't know whether you're familiar with that, with Sal Grover. So she's got a application, app for your phone that was intended for women to communicate and network and things like this. And she got into that. She's an entrepreneur, a CEO of a company that's a tech entrepreneur. She was never involved in politics and all that sort of stuff. But all of a sudden started getting transgender women trying to join this app. And she said, well, no, I just want it for biological women. She's getting taken to the court and all this sort of stuff. It's in the courts at the moment. But I think that if we're truly going to defend the freedom of association, we should defend the rights of people like Sal who want to set up spaces for who people can enter based on whatever conditions that consensually people agree to enter those spaces.
And their
they
argument
should be allowed to do that.
You should have the right to discriminate.
Effectively, yeah. Like they should be allowed to decide who comes in and out of there.
The way they weaponize the word is they say, well, then you're saying that they should have the right to discriminate. And I actually think you should be allowed to.
Well, effectively, that's what it is. But I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that, if transgender people want to set up their own spaces, or men want to set up their own spaces, or people want to set up mixed spaces.
Men have had their spaces. They've had gentlemen clubs. They've had these for since the beginning of time.
Yeah, and that's fine, I think.
And very recently...
And women have clubs too.
But very recently, women have gotten rights and all this kind of stuff, even in the West, like 100, 200 years. And all of a sudden now, we've moved that discussion to another area. It's that argument of men are so much better at everything that even being women, we're getting better than.
I'm not going to say that. My wife might be watching. So.
I'm feeling brave because she's far, but it is an issue, and the point that a lot of people always bring up is, why are you seeing so much of men or biological men or trans women competing in women's sport, and you're not really seeing it the other way? There are a few examples.
Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Like they gain physical advantage. I mean,
it is obvious, but that's the thing. So I guess we don't want government. We don't want government intervention, but at the end of the day, also the one responsibility governments do have is to protect the minorities. Now, you're saying the minority is the individual, but when these things clash, I think that there is a place for protecting just the rights that have to take all these issues into account, and that includes the fact that...
I think that a lot of codes can't actually exercise their right to freedom of association because of the interventions.
Government. What are the interventions that government has now that you're saying clashes or restricts?
So the federal discrimination laws and state, right?
Yeah, so I'd agree. Those discrimination laws have always been problematic.
So that's what they're challenging at the moment with Tickle versus Giggle, which is around. How
do I not know about this?
Yeah, that's what they're challenging, is that. The discrimination is based on gender, not sex. They're saying it should be based on sex. So that's...
Where are they? So do we know where they are in court at the moment? What stage is it?
It's still ongoing, yeah?
Yeah, it's still ongoing. But
it's been interesting.
It's going to set a big precedent, because I know that I've been told that there's gyms as well that are in the same situation. I've been told of a gym that...
is a women's only gym?
It's a women's... Not in Victoria, but it's a women's only gym. They had a large number of Muslim customers, and they accepted some transgender women into the gym, and then a large number of their other customers said, we're not coming here anymore, because they didn't want to be with the biological men. And so that was problematic. And so, you can imagine many scenarios where this might turn out to be a problem. It's crazy.
That is something that I am noticing as well, is the clash of the minorities. That's something we're seeing that's new.
Yeah.
It's a new phenomenon. And it's funny because those that are raising the flag and marching for the whole trans rights, only a few years ago, just before COVID, they were the same people marching on behalf of those Muslims. Now they're two minorities. You're seeing that, the Muslim and the Christian, but the Muslim groups in the western suburbs, especially in Sydney, there's this clash. There's this clash of ideology.
Yeah, I mean, we see that in Canada and in the States.
Everywhere,
a lot of these protests at schools and stuff.
It's a weird
school boards
time.
especially.
I think the solution to this, though, is to just respect people's freedom of association. It's okay if people want to congregate based on their own whatever reasons they want to congregate on. When we come into conflict is when they're forced to do that. That's when we have problems. If people are allowed to exercise their freedom of association, I don't think that we have these problems.
Yeah, you're right. The only answer to all this is dropping all those anti-discrimination rules.
Yeah, just allow people to exercise their natural rights.
Awesome.
I want to be able to discriminate against Rukshan every day of the week.
I won't discriminate. So there you go. The market has solved it.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Always the white person.
We'll keep moving on. So I guess we had a few other discussion points around misinformation bills and all this kind of stuff, but I think we covered a lot of that with this discussion.
And I think we're heading to the end of the...
But I do want to bring in some issues which are local, state-based, because, of course, you are in the Victorian Parliament and there's always something happening there. So today...
How much money did you get from the
real estate
developers?
Did you get money from the developers?
Nothing.
Why?
No, I don't know.
Did you meet with the developers?
He didn't want to pay 10 grand for a time with you? I'd pay 10 grand not to hang out with Dan.
But if anyone...
Mind you, I spent a lot more trying to go to his press conference.
I don't get to make any planning decisions, so yeah.
That might be why. But, we've had this...
How much did we pay for him to come on tonight?
Nothing.
We'll pass the envelope later. But we've had this Victorian anti-corruption watchdog hands down Operation Sandon report and all this IBAC stuff. And I guess in Victoria, like every couple of months on the news, I hear IBAC and there's a new investigation and they've found all this stuff that kind of seems like corruption, but it's not really corruption. What do they call it? Grey.
Oh, there's real corruption here.
I know, but they call here there is, but they say grey corruption. But as soon as it comes to touching politicians, whether it's Labor or Liberal or whoever it is, it always feels like there's nothing happens.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
Look, I think some things will happen from this. Maybe not state MPs, but I don't want to say anything because of the law.
Of course.
But like this, there is real corruption that's happened here by the look of it. But I would say.
But I guess around faith in institutions like this, in these corruption bodies, David, like you deal with these sometimes in estimates hearings or something like this. Do you talk to them or?
Look, I have, I have my concerns about the anti-corruption bodies. What I have bigger concerns about is the system itself invites corruption, right? We see now, I think our planning system, it's like it was designed to be corrupted, right? It's like you have a piece of land which has a certain value, and if you change the zoning on it, it'll have a higher value, right? And the person that's going to be able to change that value is some councillor, right?
Yeah.
It's like asking for corruption. Now, I have serious concerns about our entire planning system. I think that a lot of this should be, removed. I think that the problem here is that there is too many planning controls, too many regulations. If you remove that, you'll remove a lot of the corruption. I think the same, I've said many times about, our drug laws, the whole Lawyer X scandal and all that. That was all about our drug laws. So I think in many cases, the system designed by the government has, in many cases, caused the corruption or at least made a honeypot for the corruption in the first place. And to get rid of it, there's ways to get rid of it. Like, you can't have planning corruption in planning if you simplify planning controls and make them more open and transparent about how it works. I don't think that you would have this sort of situation that you've seen here.
I have a very close friend who fell in the opposite situation. She had a building and the zoning changed so a few years ago it was worth a lot more because the zoning changed that suddenly you couldn't build multiple stories there. And should have just done that $10,000 dinner. Maybe would have made $1 million, $2 million on that.
But I mean,
it's so unfair because people, and this is a serious story, is people invest in properties with the idea that one day I'll either develop or sell it, and then the zoning changes overnight. And I know some people benefit the zoning changes to allow them, but generally those are people in the know that that have friends in high places, as we see. But the average person who invests, their hard-earned dollars into what would be a retirement fund or a fund for their next generation, for their kids, and then suddenly it's stripped from them because the local council decided no, they don't want high rises on this particular block now. That until this day, so literally overnight, you can knock it into. I think it would have been a quarter lost of the value.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a libertarian. I'm always going to go back to rights.
Yeah.
The rights here is property rights, okay? And what's happening with planning controls when they do this sort of thing, like you talk about with your friend, they're overriding people's property rights because if a person owns property, my view is that they should be allowed to do what they want with that property as long as they're not hurting someone else.
But then they argue that hurting someone else is if you put a high rise next to my property. This is playing devil's advocate. This is what they would say is, well, you're hurting my right to be on my property and do what I want.
Well, if you're causing damage to them by damaging their amenity or whatever, then you can.
But you're blocking
you can
their
figure
view.
that out with negotiation, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that you necessarily need planning controls to figure that.
I actually totally agree with you, but I
you can
guess
pay compensation or whatever. You can say, well, the view's being damaged, and you can figure that out. But ultimately, what's happening with a lot of these things is you've got groups of people that are effectively trying to exercise property rights over other people's property, which is causing all these problems. Yeah. And
you make a good point, actually. Thinking about it as you're talking, if the neighbour wanted, in theory, if they wanted to build a high rise, and the rule was all you had to do was have the direct properties around you have some sort of agreement between you. A lot of properties, they'd go, yeah, you can build a high rise, but you got to pay me out something, and it's worth it for the developer as well as the person who's going to lose their view. Going, oh, that's great, yeah. I'll take a bit of cash and you can take away my view, and then it's a win-win. Except the government doesn't get any extra cash.
Yeah, the government doesn't win.
The government doesn't win, but
that's not going to happen in
it's
Victoria.
Never going to happen.
It's got to be down to defending property rights,
Yeah.
and in many of these cases, it's really just the whim of the local council or the whim of the planning minister or whatever it is. And
they're all on power trips half the time.
Yeah, they're on power trips. So, we got to fall back on our first thing should be we defend people's property rights. And if people exercising those property rights infringes on other people's property rights, then we need to have a discussion about how to manage that conflict of rights.
Yep.
But we shouldn't just say, no, you can't build.
Yeah. That should be, there should be some sort of...
100%. Speaking about power trips, I guess one of the main... Something we touched on earlier today was around COVID and potentially, I think you're calling for a commission, some sort of commission into COVID in the state of Victoria or a Royal Commission federally?
Well, we can have Royal Commissions in Victoria too, but the federal government's, they promised before the election that they were going to have a Royal Commission, and I haven't seen
into
anything.
COVID.
Yeah.
The Labor government.
Yeah.
They were saying those kind of things, weren't they?
They were just saying that because they were saying Scott Morrison screwed everything up.
Yeah, I think they've realised that it's not going to look good for them either.
Yeah.
So, they're all pretty quiet about it. But we absolutely need a Royal Commission into COVID, whether it's state or federal, I don't really care. But there needs to be some sort of reckoning.
100%.
Because we don't know, all the people who are involved in this and, who are the leaders and decision makers here, I don't think that we've really, because we haven't had a reckoning, we haven't got to the stage where we know whether they actually made good decisions or not. And they're moving on to other, in charge of other institutions. Brett Sutton's moved on and all these other people
maybe
have moved
you don't
on.
know. I can tell you they made bad decisions.
I have my views, and I'm sure you have your views.
We can make a Royal Commission right now.
Well, with that,
But we need to.
one of the issues recently, topics that came up was around the payments to the people that were locked up in that the housing commission. Housing commission flats, and they were locked up, and then the government's not admitted fault, but they've given them compensation, a few $1,000s each, but they're not admitting that they did anything wrong. Like, what is that?
Look, the ombudsman in 2020, I think it was quite emphatic in her. Deborah Glass, she does a really good job, I think, and she stated quite clearly that she said human rights had been breached. Look, my view is that if your rights have been breached, then you're probably deserving of some sort of compensation. The problem I've got is that every Victorian's rights were breached.
Yeah.
And you can't pay compensation to every Victorian because the tax the money for the compensation comes from every Victorian. So that's not really going to work.
But the problem here is then, what do we want to achieve, and what will a Royal Commission, even if we got a Royal Commission, what will it achieve? Because sorry?
We need answers. I think we need answers.
But we need answers is one, but all these things, heads need to actually roll, and there needs to be, when you say a reckoning, I think people in the future need to look back at this time and say, hey, if I go on this power trip and I do what I want, or I'm not opportunistic with them in the moment, that one day I'll come and pay the price. But it's never going to, but even if they got a Royal Commission, will that even happen?
Well, look,
the first step is a Royal Commission.
I can't say, but look, I think...
How often do Royal Commissions actually...
Some of them do some really good work and some of them don't. So, you know, it really depends. There's been some Royal Commissions that have really turned states upside down with the findings that they've come up with.
Yeah.
You said before, like, what do I want to happen? I want us to find out mistakes and make sure we never make them again. Like,
I could tell you one mistake.
I can tell you lots of mistakes.
Daniel Andrews.
Well...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if locking down those housing towers was a mistake, let's find out like the decisions that, led to that and make sure we don't do it again.
It was unprecedented. It was unprecedented.
Well,
that's the excuse.
Mind you, I'm going to be completely honest here. You were probably better than me at that point because that was very early on. What were the dates on the towers?
I think it was 20.
It was March.
It was 2020.
It was March. 2020? I think it was like March or April. It was.
I'm not sure the exact date.
It was
2020. Doesn't say.
I don't know what month. It was
14th July.
Yeah,
July. All right,
so that was very early.
It was very early for here, and I wasn't that opposed to it at the time. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I remember that specific thing at that time. I was caught up a little bit in it. I think still. I don't remember.
I think if you ask a lot of the community at that time, people were bought into the whole fear aspect of it, right? It was a lot of people bought into the fear of it. But today, after seeing everything we've seen, what David says is correct. We need to understand why these decisions were made in the way that they were made. So next time that governments are faced with such unprecedented circumstances, which they keep alluding to that they probably will be, they make the right decisions and right calls. And
or at least they know they're going to be held accountable. I think in that one, look, I think if that was the only thing that happened, we could go, okay, that was a scary time.
It's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
But that was just the start. And that's the thing is that was the first real major thing that happened. And they've been found to be so wrong and they're being paid. Well, what about everything since then?
The reason that they were found to be wrong, or what they did was wrong, is because it was investigated by the ombudsman.
Okay.
Nothing else was investigated, right? Like, and I think a Royal Commission, I'd hope that a Royal Commission could go through many of the actions that happened during the pandemic, the same way as the ombudsman has done. I think she did a great piece of work in this.
I reckon Victoria Police might have a bit of a hard time with that Royal Commission.
Look, I think the way that Australia is set up and the way that things are going, we will have an investigation Royal Commission into all of this, but it'll be long after these politicians have left office and they've all moved on. I think it's going to take something like this in this current sitting of Parliament or even the next sitting of Parliament. It's not going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen at all because I think that once, even
Labor and Liberal probably not.
But also the public's, people are moving on from it. So with a lot of other Royal Commissions, it's often things that you can argue are ongoing.
Yep.
But now they feel like there's no political thing behind it. So no side is going to push for it because it's a thing of the past. But the reason why we have to talk about it is because it's not just COVID. COVID's now the unprecedented, or it was the unprecedented. Next could be anything. Could be climate change. Could be any issue that suddenly there's an emergency and suddenly they enact those same emergency powers. And if there's no Royal Commission on COVID, it's gonna repeat itself because
I share your concern. Like I think that the scariest thing about COVID is not what happened. It's that what did government learn from COVID? They learned that they can get away with locking the entire population in their homes. They got a taste of power.
Minus us three.
And there's a lot of people out there that, some people from the left even that are pushing for, they talk about climate emergency. Like You don't think they want to use emergency powers?
Of course.
Absolutely they do.
Of course.
Absolutely they do.
Of
They
course.
saw what the government did,
Of
and they were
course.
inspired by it. They were inspired.
They were
by it.
marching for the government. Do you remember they were the same people that
I'll
marched
never-
for climate
I will
change?
never understand
They
that.
marched for that.
Yeah.
Have we got much more or a couple comments? Because I think we're running.
One question, David, just on about the hospitals critically being understaffed in Victoria. Obviously, that's an issue.
Why are you
with-
not putting it on the screen?
It's just long questions. I'm just keeping it short. But yeah, like understaffing in general. You're not in the government per se, but is there things happening that might resolve some of these issues, or is the Andrews government really just lost control of the situation?
Look, I think with understaffing, a lot of it is, there's been a big demand on the hospital system. They have been trying to skill up lots of nurses, especially. They've been trying to, poach people from interstate and internationally. It's a really tricky question. I think that a lot of the problems during the pandemic with hospitals being overwhelmed were about people not wanting to go to their local GP or being refused from their local GP because they had a respiratory illness. So I think those sort of issues have gone away. Look, I'm not sure what the answer is to this other than they need to be more efficient in what they do, because like a lot of this stuff is really, really inefficient, the way that they're organising everything. They were doing one thing that I thought was good, which was they were allowing, I think they're called, I can't remember the name, assistant paramedics, basically trainee paramedics, to go in ambulances with paramedics to effectively increase the workforce. I thought that was
But
a
they're
pretty
still
good
not
thing.
letting the unvaccinated paramedics that are fully qualified and experienced to come back.
So I don't know the numbers of those, but
Well, I did a
obviously
story.
some-
I did a
some-
story a couple of weeks ago with. There's a group of them. They say that there's about 50 of them in the group.
Yeah.
They say they have 30 to 50 that. So the organizer of it says she has 30 to 50. So there's about 50 in the core group, but there's 30 to 50 that are willing to go back to work now. Willing to go back. There's some that don't want to. They're just too
Yeah, of
upset.
course.
But 30 to 50 of them willing to go back, and most of them have plenty of experience under their belts, but they just cannot.
So they should be allowed, in my view. I
Why is
think,
no one pushing that?
Well, we've been pushing it. We've been pushing it behind the scenes, and we've been successful in some areas. We've been pushing through many areas. So we pushed through Department of Corrections, and that's gone now. We pushed through Parliament itself. That's gone now, the vaccine mandates. But
Paramedic? Have you guys pushed the paramedics?
So healthcare has been
Yeah.
the hard one. So the government's just sort of dug in on healthcare and paramedics.
And it's the one
But-
industry they're saying that we're struggling so hard at the moment.
Yeah, look, is 30 to 50 people going to make a difference? Well, yeah, it'll make a small difference. Is it enough to fix the problems? Probably not. But certainly I don't see any real
But
rational...
that's just paramedics.
Yeah, of course. There's doctors and nurses and everything else. But I don't see any real, rational explanation why mandates should be continued anywhere for the COVID vaccines. So I was opposed to them from the start.
We
So-
remember. You're one of the
Yeah.
good guys.
we were opposed to them from the start, but they just seem to be digging in healthcare. But they are dropping them across the board in other areas of public sector. They've dropped it in most of the private sector as well.
For the record, we checked your Vax passport when you came in here today.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay.
I have a biometric scanner up there that scans straight to the digital ID.
Right.
That's actually a topic I wanted to talk about, but we don't have time for.
I think
time
we
for that
need
today.
to wrap
all-
up because we're an hour and a
Yeah.
half. I think today's been actually a really good conversation.
Well, it's just been you and David arguing with each other. I've just been watching, and it's been entertaining. But it's been very.
He's going to say that as the person of most colour, he was silenced and wasn't given a platform to talk.
No. But thank you everyone for watching today. And I see lots of comments, and unfortunately we couldn't get to everything today. I'm just having a look if there's anything super important that I might have missed. Just give me a second. But yeah, Avi, if you want to wrap it up while I have a look.
So we want to thank everyone for joining us on the feed. From now on, we are committing to 7 p.m. on Thursday nights. You can catch up on all the episodes at theopposition.show. I feel like we're getting better each week. Maybe it's just the caliber of our guests.
It must be.
It's improving every week.
Who are we going to get next week?
I don't know.
Let us know who you think we should get. Well, I want to get some people we disagree on everything. You see, with David, it was just one issue. I was trying to pick more issues I can disagree with him on. But it's just a book. David, do you commit to reading the book this week?
Yeah.
I don't want to buy it. Why do you want to give him money?
You can maybe ask Senator Babette and get.
I'll borrow it from Babette.
get
The
some-
library of Babette.
But Babette's put like all sorts of like notes and stuff
Yeah,
on
I
it.
saw people making fun of him for it. They're like, he's way too-
He's helped their sales.
I reckon you can look online. I reckon you can read it online.
Probably can.
Will you read it so we can continue this
A lot of
conversation?
people are telling you to read it.
It's the one thing
Your
that I
homework.
disagree with you, but it's unfair because you haven't actually read it.
I'm surprised you're not asking me to read your book.
I'm expecting you to read the book.
All right, guys, and with that, we're going to wrap up. Let's not talk about Avi's books. Thanks again, everyone.
Rebelfromthestart.com. See you next week,
See you
7
next week,
p.m.
guys. Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
being with us tonight.